While I was researching, I came across a lot of YouTube videos that are calling the new version of Running Man a remake, and that take is the farthest thing from the truth, because the first Running Man was a vast departure from the original material. If anything, the new film should be called a correct adaptation, like John Carpenter's The Thing did with Who Goes There. So let's get this video started, and I'll explain why I'm saying these things. The Running Man began with its author, Stephen King. King was well known by the early 1980s as Carrie and The Shining were very successful. Other big works included Salem's Lot, The Stand, The Dead Zone, Cujo, and Firestarter. Around the mid-1970s, King questioned his talents and also worried he was oversaturating the market with his titles. So he decided to test if he was a good enough writer to be successful under an alternate name, Richard Bachman. His first book using this new name was Rage in 1977, though King would continue writing under his own name alongside it. But he still used this fake name for 3 other books: The Long Walk, Road Work, and The Running Man in 1982. King stated he wrote The Running Man within a week. Now I'm going to warn you right up front that if you intend to see the 2025 Running Man, knowing the book will spoil a lot of that film. So, you have been warned. The book shows the life of Ben Richards in a future where being poor is the normal state of existence. They are so desperate, his wife must prostitute herself to get money, and his young daughter is terribly ill. But it's very expensive to get medical attention, so without any hope, he decides to sign up for the government-sponsored game shows, where people risk their lives to get money. He works his way through physical tests, written tests, where the test giver is an attractive woman who tries to distract those taking the test to see if they're easily manipulated. And then he has to go through ink blots, psychological evals, and other things. By the time he gets to the end, a group of people are given assignments, and Ben Richards is asked to go in an elevator, where he goes upstairs with another prisoner named Jimmy Laughlin. In this book, Richards is just a scrawny man with an attitude against authority. He says what he wants and doesn't give a crap. Insulting others who are part of the system seems to be natural for him. Ben discovers he's hit the big time and will appear on The Running Man, where he will get $100 new an hour for staying alive as long as he lasts 48 hours. He will get a 12-hour head start and will be declared an enemy of the state, in which citizens can try to harm him for their own reward. All the while, he's hunted by stalkers. And if they call in his location and it turns out fruitful, they can win $1,000. If he lasts 30 days, he will win the grand prize of $1 billion. In this book, Killian is not such a villain. Instead, he tries to show manners and respect to Richards, always offering to shake his hand and talking politely with the contestants rather than treating them like meat for the slaughter, even though Ben never accepts Killian's handshakes. Killian even goes as far as to give helpful advice to Richards and gives him an advance on his pay for the show to help his family. The real villain of the book is the contest itself and the normal people that are a danger to the contestants. When Ben is introduced to the audience, he is booed and shunned, like the film. But there is no grand lies to build him up. There are some falsehoods about him and his family, because the show does not want the audience to be sympathetic to him as a contestant, as that would be counterproductive to the show. When he is rolled off stage, Ben has a 12-hour head start, and he is put in an elevator and left to his own devices. The first place he goes is to a sordid outfit that can make false documents that Ben hopes will allow him to move around safely with a gray-haired wig, fake mustache, and other cosmetics. The first place he goes is to New York, and he books into a crummy hotel for a day. A very unfair thing the show does is demand that Ben mail in video footage of himself twice a day. It is sent through the post office, and this causes the game company to easily trace his general postal code. I suppose the logic is that when the package is picked up at the post office, somehow it's locally dealt with to faster locate Ben. But I'm assuming here. Anyways, Ben is very antsy at the hotel and quickly leaves, taking a bus to Boston. Ben is very smart in this book, thinking like he's going to get caught and being very rational and using foresight while constantly changing his patterns. He stays under the radar and tries his best to keep hidden. He isn't playing it stupid, which I appreciated. When he arrives at another hotel, he continues to hide out, but can't help staring out the window in paranoia. And when he sees some locals lingering about, he begins to think someone is preparing to close in on him. So he stealthily heads to the basement and escapes through the sewers. When he exits the sewers, he runs into a 7-year-old juvenile delinquent with a bad mouth, who he befriends. The kid introduces him to his family, and they have fallen on hard times just like Ben. In fact, they have a daughter suffering from sickness too. Compassionately, the oldest boy, who is no stranger to trouble, decides to help Ben and says he will drive him to another town if he can help them with some money for their family. Ben agrees and is smuggled in the trunk of their car. When he arrives to a new town, after 2 hours of driving, he disguises himself as a blind priest, thanks to a costume his friend obtained. He is then dropped off at the hotel, and it is set up that the videos he has to mail will be sent through different contacts through the help of his new friend. He also has a safe house he can go to. When he asks why he is helping him, the man just says he has to fight the man, and if he wins, he can make them rich. But things don't go well. Richards has bad dreams, and through paranoia, he heads to the safe house in another state, not wanting to risk anything. Richards arrives to this safe house, and it's owned by an overweight man and a mother who is not all there. She wants Ben to leave because she's paranoid they are going to get caught, but his son tells her mother to calm down because they've harbored many people in the past. However, the dumb mother decides to call the police, causing the man and Ben to run for it as the police approach. They barely make it out of the area alive, and Ben has to kill some cops with a gun he acquired earlier to get away. Both men are wounded, and the fat man drops Ben off at an abandoned mall out in the middle of nowhere. Then the big man drives off and bleeds to death. Now Ben is in real trouble here. His ankle and nose seems broken, and he has no transportation. In about a day, if he doesn't mail another tape, his family will receive no money, because his network of helpers are now exposed, or worse, dead. But he will still be a fugitive, so he decides what the hell. He makes makeshift crutches and limps away from the mall. He finds his way to a small community, then mails his current video, knowing it will be tracked. And then the first car he sees coming to a stop sign, he jumps in with his gun pointed at the driver. The driver is a girl, and she seems innocent and well-to-do. She recognizes Richards and asks him to let her out, and she will just give him the car, but Richards is not in the best shape. She complains that he's a criminal and she's innocent, and Richard angrily tells her he is too. He's only doing this to save his family, which she doesn't believe, as she's brainwashed by the news she watches. When police spot them, Richard tells her to yell out of the car that she is a hostage and that she will be killed if they don't let her by. The cops don't care, and they're about to kill her and Richards. But they get away when Ben starts shooting. The girl, named Amelia, is panicking that the cops would kill her carelessly. But then Richard tells her to pull over real quick so he can make a phone call. He calls the press and tells them where he is and tells them he's heading to a place nearby. When the news realizes it's really Richards, they are overjoyed to get an exclusive and send trucks to film his death, and they announce it on the air. Then Richards and Amelia drive on, and soon many citizens line the road to cheer him on. But after a few streets, there are cops waiting in their path, and citizens everywhere are cheering him on. The news is there too, and the cops try to block the news, and citizens start attacking the cops for threatening his hostage. Ben knew with the news there they couldn't just kill her, so they get away and head to the airport. When they get to the airport, Ben pretends he's going to turn himself in and starts worrying more about this innocent woman than himself. But then Ben pretends he has an elaborate bomb, and a hunter, or stalker, is there waiting for him. Ben is very knowledgeable of his fake bomb, and Amelia is versed and confirms his false story to help him. All this culminates to Ben, Amelia, and the hunter getting on a private plane, and the pilots take off with instructions to fly low in the event something funny happens. The fake bomb would destroy whatever would be below. Of course, things go sour, but when the network sees it can't control Richards, Killian offers Richards a job as a hunter or stalker. But everything falls apart when it is reported that Richards' wife and daughter died. With nothing to believe in and no trust in the network, Richards crashes his plane into the ICS building, ending the book. King described The Running Man as a book written by a young man who was angry, energetic, and infuriated with the art and the craft of writing. He also stated that Ben Richards was scrawny and pre-tubercular. Since no one knew that King was the author at the time, the book did fine, but didn't sell over 100,000 copies, and thus it stayed under the radar. In the early 80s, Stephen King's books were literally collected by Hollywood to adapt. He already had books and short stories done by Hollywood, like Carrie, Salem's Lot, Cat's Eye, Silver Bullet, The Shining, Cujo, The Dead Zone, and more. But the funny thing was, someone who had nothing to do with Hollywood would purchase the rights to Running Man. George Linder was the largest supplier in the U.S. for lightweight wheelchairs, and while at the airport, he bought a book in 1982 to have something to read. He really liked the book and had visions of it being made into a movie, so he reached out to Richard Bachman's agent. I contacted the author's agent and was a bit taken back to learn that he was asking a comparatively great deal of money for the option of a book which had less than 100,000 copies in print. I mean, who had ever heard of Richard Bachman? But being plenty rich, Linder paid the $20,000 to secure the rights, and if the film was ever made, he would have to pay more later. Then Linder worked on a script by himself with a few unprofessional writers, and according to later screenwriter Stephen E. D'Souza, it was not written very well, but it was close to the book. When Linder finally finished his idea, he searched around Hollywood to find someone to help him make his movie, which he intended to produce. So in 1985, he found the Taft Barish Productions, owned by Keith Barish and assisted by well-known producer Rob Cohen. Cohen had been linked to such TV shows as MASH, Miami Vice, and he produced a plethora of films like The Wiz and Razor's Edge. They liked his film idea and the book, even though the script needed work. However, Cohen was very confused over the rights and told Linder, "Boy, you made a lousy deal. Why is the second payment so high?" So Cohen, Linder, and Barish had to look into this writer in order to budget this movie and start the ball rolling. Finally, they spoke to the publisher of Running Man, and they finally discovered that the author was really Stephen King. I felt like I'd found a Rembrandt in Kmart. With this information, the studio quickly greenlit The Running Man, but in order to credit Stephen King, they would need to pay 7 figures extra to do so, and that was after the expense of purchasing the book entirely to make the movie. The producers claim that's why King was never credited. However, we will go into King's side of the story in a little bit. To keep with the look of the character in the book, they focused on the idea of casting Christopher Reeve. Reeve was an iconic name at the time, and to have his name on a movie with Stephen King made the producers think of dollar signs. Reeve was known mainly for Superman, and this frustrated the actor because everyone saw him as Superman, even though he hadn't played the character for 2 years in 1985. He had just been praised for his excellent performance in The Bostonians, but the producer of the film, James Ivory, said that Christopher was really undervalued by the critics, and even the awards, because they were so used to thinking of him as Superman. This caused Reeves to work in theater instead of films, and when he was sought out for films, he asked the high asking price of $1 million just to be in a film. Reeve was offered so many scripts, and he turned all of them down, choosing theater instead, because he really wanted performances that would transform him from being Superman to being an actor known for different works. So in 1985, he was pitched The Running Man, and although it was different, it just couldn't hold him, and he would eventually pass. They also toyed with the idea of bringing in Patrick Swayze or Dolph Lundgren for the lead, but obviously they didn't land the role. Then in late 1985, the producers saw Commando, and Arnold Schwarzenegger's name in Hollywood was growing. To get Arnold, they called Stephen E. D'Souza, who was Arnold's favorite writer at that time, and he wrote many big films in the 80s like Commando, 48 Hours, The Running Man, and later Die Hard. Stephen was even asked by Arnold to help him make dialogue for his movie Raw Deal. The producers figured if he wrote The Running Man with Arnold in mind, he could present it to his friend to make things smoother in obtaining Arnold. And we know this worked, but we'll have to wait to go into that next Friday. And one of the reasons this video is so short is that during our Tron Legacy coverage, our channel was forced about 2 weeks behind, and we lost a lot of ground. And then we did Tron Ares, which meant we couldn't work on Running Man. As a result, we're in a race to catch up. So our apologies for a video that's shorter than usual, but we'll see you next week. And don't forget to check out our Patreon, where you can see videos early, plus exclusive content on that platform. Link is in the description. If you like what you see here, click like and subscribe. Super thanks helps, but so does sharing.